The ballroom shimmered with gold, the air rich with laughter and music, a place where ambition and elegance collided beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen constellations. Olivia Mitchell had walked into many high-stakes rooms before, but tonight felt different. The Grand Meridian Hotel, with its towering ceilings and marble floors, wasn't just another venue, it was a stage for the elite, where reputations were built and careers were made. For Olivia, newly appointed as head of marketing at Archer Industries, this gala wasn't only an event to attend, it was a silent test, a chance to prove that she belonged among the city's most powerful. Every step she took across the polished floor echoed a quiet determination that had been forged through years of hard work, heartbreak, and resilience. She smiled at the familiar faces, exchanged polite greetings, and accepted congratulations for her promotion, but beneath the polished exterior, a subtle current of anxiety ran deep. The whispers of the crowd, the clinking of glasses, the symphony playing in the corner, all of it blurred into a soft hum when her eyes caught sight of someone across the room. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. There he was, Ryan Cooper, the man who had once promised her forever and delivered nothing but pain. The man whose manipulation had almost destroyed her confidence, whose betrayal had turned love into a wound that took years to heal. He looked almost the same, impeccably dressed, charming, his smile still carrying that dangerous ease. He was talking to a group of investors, laughing effortlessly, as if the past had never happened. Olivia's pulse quickened. Her instinct screamed to leave, to turn away before he noticed her, but fate was cruelly precise. Ryan looked up, and their eyes met. His smile faltered for just a second, then curved into that same smug expression she remembered too well. He began walking toward her. Panic clawed at her composure. She couldn't let him see that he still had the power to shake her. She scanned the room in desperation, searching for a lifeline, for anything that would stop him from approaching, and then she saw him. A man standing a few feet away, tall and composed, his presence effortlessly commanding yet quiet. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, his posture confident but not arrogant. His gaze seemed observant, calm, almost protective. Without thinking, Olivia walked toward him and whispered, her voice trembling but urgent, "Please, can you dance with me? My ex is walking over, and I just need him to think I'm with someone." The stranger turned his head slightly, studying her for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then, a small, knowing smile appeared on his lips. "Of course," he said gently, offering his hand. "Let's not keep him waiting." The orchestra swelled just as they stepped onto the dance floor. Olivia's hand fit naturally into his, and when his arm moved around her waist, the rest of the world seemed to fade. Every turn, every graceful step was unspoken chemistry, a dance that felt rehearsed even though it wasn't. She could feel Ryan's gaze burning from somewhere in the crowd, but for once, she didn't care. The stranger's calm presence was enough to make her forget the panic, the years of pain, and the self-doubt that had haunted her. They didn't speak for the first few moments, and yet something about the silence felt intimate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, warm, and steady. "You handle pressure well," he said with a faint smile. "Most people would have run." Olivia laughed softly, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed making. "Running was my first option," she admitted. "But it's not really professional to sprint out of a gala." "True," he said, eyes glinting with humor. "Though I'd say pretending to be with a stranger ranks pretty high on the list of bold decisions." "I suppose tonight's a night for bold decisions," she replied, her confidence returning with every step. As they danced, she found herself studying him, his quiet assurance, the way he carried himself, the way his words felt deliberate and thoughtful. He was clearly not the type who needed to prove his importance. In a room full of people trying to be seen, he was at ease being the observer. When the song ended, he didn't let go of her hand right away. "I'm James," he said simply. "Olivia," she replied. "It's a pleasure, Olivia," he said, his tone sincere. "And for what it's worth, you looked like you didn't need saving." She smiled, slightly flustered but intrigued. "Maybe not. But I appreciate it anyway." They spent the next hour talking near the balcony, away from the main crowd. Conversation came easily, about work, travel, books, and the absurdity of small talk at corporate events. There was no posturing, no veiled flattery. Just two people who, somehow, seemed to understand each other without effort. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt comfortable being herself, but as the night drew on and the event began to thin, she realized how little she knew about him. No last name, no job title, no company. Just, James. Yet something about him lingered, his honesty, his stillness, the way he'd looked at her not with desire or calculation, but curiosity and respect. When he finally excused himself, he took her hand gently and said, "I hope we meet again." Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing in the golden haze of the ballroom, wondering if the night had been real or just a beautifully timed illusion. What she didn't know, what no one could have told her, was that James wasn't a guest or a friend of a friend. He was Jackson Archer, the elusive billionaire CEO of Archer Industries, the very company where Olivia worked. A man so reclusive that few in the company had even met him in person. To Olivia, he had been just a kind stranger who'd helped her reclaim her confidence for one night. To him, she had been a mystery worth remembering. As she left the ballroom, the city lights outside shimmered like 1,000 possibilities. She didn't know that this single encounter, born from desperation, would alter the course of her career, her love life, and her understanding of trust. Because that night, a dance meant to shield her from her past had unknowingly tied her future to the man who controlled her professional destiny. By the time her car pulled away from the Grand Meridian, the night's laughter and music faded into the background, but one image stayed with her, his eyes, calm and piercing, watching her as if he already knew she'd be more than just another passing face in a crowd. She didn't know his real name. She didn't know his power. But she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all. The next morning began like any other at Archer Industries, but for Olivia, the world seemed subtly different. The glow from last night's encounter still lingered somewhere in her thoughts, even as she tried to bury it beneath spreadsheets, presentations, and the endless hum of office life. The memory of James, his calm eyes, the warmth of his voice, kept replaying in her mind, distracting her in the middle of meetings. She told herself it was nothing more than a passing moment, a strange coincidence born from desperation and timing. People met strangers every day, danced with them, talked for hours, and never saw them again. That's what this was supposed to be, something fleeting. And yet, she couldn't quite convince herself to forget it. Her day was packed with deadlines. The marketing team was finalizing a new campaign for the company's global rebranding, and Olivia's role as the new head of marketing came with both prestige and pressure. She was expected to impress the executives, prove her worth quickly, and show that her promotion wasn't a mistake. Her focus had to be razor-sharp. But even as she typed out reports and led brainstorming sessions, her mind wandered back to that ballroom, to the stranger who'd stepped into her chaos with quiet strength. By noon, the office buzzed with rumors of a special executive meeting scheduled for the afternoon. "He's coming in person," one of her colleagues whispered excitedly by the coffee machine. "Apparently, he wants to see the new marketing direction himself." Olivia frowned. "Who's coming?" The colleague looked almost scandalized. "Jackson Archer, obviously. The man himself." The name hit her like a thunderclap. Jackson Archer, the elusive CEO, the mind behind the billion-dollar empire. He was a legend within the company, a man of vision and mystery, known for his sharp instincts and his distaste for the spotlight. Few people had ever met him in person. His appearances were rare, his interviews non-existent. To most employees, he was more myth than man. Olivia straightened her blazer and forced herself to focus. The team had worked tirelessly on this presentation. There was no room for nerves, no time for distractions, not even the lingering thought of the stranger she'd danced with the night before. She told herself that was a different world, one that had nothing to do with the polished, demanding environment of Archer Industries. When the meeting began, the room was electric with anticipation. Executives sat upright, assistants hovered near the walls, and every eye turned to the door when it opened. The moment he walked in, the air shifted. His presence commanded quiet, not through intimidation but through authority that came effortlessly. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. But it was. The man who entered wasn't just Jackson Archer. He was James, the stranger from the gala, the man who had taken her hand and danced her fears away. For a moment, time seemed to stutter. He was dressed in a dark suit, confidence wrapped around him like a second skin, but his eyes, those same calm, piercing eyes, met hers, and she knew he recognized her too. His expression didn't betray much, only the faintest flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by the composed demeanor of a man used to control. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice steady, professional, and unmistakably the same. "Let's begin." Olivia forced herself to sit straighter, her heartbeat loud in her ears. This wasn't possible. The man she'd thought was just a stranger, someone passing through her story, was her boss, the most powerful person in the company. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions, embarrassment, confusion, disbelief, and, beneath it all, a strange sense of awe. Throughout the presentation, she tried to focus on her slides, on her team's hard work, but every time she spoke, she felt his gaze. Not intrusive or judgmental, just observant, as though he was studying her with the same quiet curiosity he'd shown the night before. It made her both nervous and oddly reassured. When she finished her section, she dared to glance his way, and for the briefest moment, he gave her a small nod, an acknowledgement that sent warmth through her chest. After the meeting, the room emptied slowly. Olivia lingered behind, gathering her notes, her mind spinning. She knew he would approach her. She could feel it before he even spoke. "Olivia," he said, his tone calm but layered with meaning. She turned to face him, trying to mask her shock with professionalism. "Mr. Archer." He smiled slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting in amusement. "So it's Mr. Archer now?" Her composure wavered. "I didn't realize last night." "Of course you didn't," he interrupted gently. "And that's precisely why it was refreshing." Her breath caught. "Refreshing?" He nodded. "People usually know who I am before they even shake my hand. You didn't. You talked to me like a person, not a headline." Olivia didn't know how to respond. There was a vulnerability in his honesty that she hadn't expected. She finally said, "If I'd known, I wouldn't have asked me to dance," he finished for her, smiling faintly. "I'm glad you did." Silence stretched between them. The office around them seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of the moment. He looked at her for a few seconds longer before speaking again. "You did impressive work today. Your presentation was clear, confident, and different. I like different." "Thank you," she said softly, forcing herself to breathe. As he turned to leave, he paused by the door. "You'll be leading the next phase of the campaign directly under my review," he said, glancing back at her. "I look forward to working closely with you, Olivia." Then he was gone. She stood there for a long moment after he left, staring at the empty space where he'd been. Her thoughts were a storm. Working under Jackson Archer was a dream for anyone in her department, a career-making opportunity. But for her, it was far more complicated. How could she balance the professional boundary with the undeniable connection that had sparked between them? Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed frequently. Meetings, project reviews, late-night brainstorming sessions, it became impossible to ignore the growing undercurrent between them. He was always composed, always respectful, but there was something in his eyes whenever they spoke, a quiet recognition of that night, of the way their story had started. And she felt it too, though she tried her best to bury it beneath professionalism. He challenged her in ways no one else had. His questions were sharp but thoughtful, his praise, when it came, was genuine and measured. He valued her ideas, often asking for her opinion even when others disagreed. Slowly, admiration began to blend with something deeper, something neither of them dared to name. Late one evening, as the office lights dimmed and the city glowed outside the glass walls, Olivia realized something she couldn't deny anymore. The man she had once thought was a fleeting stranger had become the center of her world again, not through romance, not yet, but through respect, through shared understanding, through something real and steady. She didn't know what it meant, or where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Olivia's life changed completely. The more she worked with Jackson Archer, the more she realized how different he was from the image she had built in her mind. At first, she had thought of him as the untouchable CEO, the kind of man whose every move was calculated and whose words carried power. But as she spent time with him, long hours in the conference room, working on strategies that pushed the company forward, she saw glimpses of the man behind the title. He was patient, thoughtful, and surprisingly human. He noticed small details, like the way people spoke when they were nervous or how ideas could bloom when someone was truly listened to. He wasn't loud or domineering. His authority came from quiet confidence, the kind that made people want to follow him rather than feel forced to. Olivia found herself drawn to that calm strength. It wasn't about power or charm, it was the way he made her feel seen. In meetings, when others interrupted or dismissed her points, Jackson always made sure her voice was heard. He didn't have to defend her, he just gave her the space to prove herself, and that meant more than any grand gesture could. Still, the unspoken tension between them grew stronger with each passing day. They never mentioned that night, never referred to the dance or the conversation that had started it all, but it lingered between them like a secret neither could ignore. One evening, after a long day of presentations, Jackson called her into his office. The city lights shimmered outside, and his usually composed expression carried a weariness she hadn't seen before. "You've done exceptional work," he said quietly. "This campaign, your creativity, your strategy, it's beyond what I expected." Olivia felt warmth rise in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "But it was a team effort." He smiled faintly. "You're humble, but I know what leadership looks like. You're not just good at your job, you make people believe in what they're doing. That's rare." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of meaning, filled with words neither dared to say. Olivia looked at him, at the man who had become both her mentor and her mystery. There was a gentleness in his eyes that contradicted his reputation, and she wondered how many people had ever seen this version of him. Then, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened before he declined the call. "Work never stops," he murmured, setting the phone aside. But something in his expression told her that it wasn't just business weighing on him. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. He hesitated, as if debating whether to answer, and then said, "Some things in life demand more than decisions and strategies. Some things, you can't control, no matter how powerful you are." She wanted to ask more, but she didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "Sometimes, control isn't what we need. Sometimes, it's enough to just let life happen." He looked at her for a long moment, and then smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's learned that the hard way." "I have," she admitted. "Haven't we all?" That conversation stayed with both of them. Over the following days, their professional connection deepened into something more personal. They still maintained boundaries, but there was an ease in their interactions that went beyond business. They started sharing coffee in the mornings before meetings, discussing ideas that stretched beyond marketing or profits. Jackson asked about her dreams, her past, the things that shaped her, and Olivia found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. She told him about how she had worked her way up from nothing, about the nights she'd stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home, believing that hard work would eventually make her seen. He listened, not with the polite nod of a boss, but with genuine attention. "You didn't just build a career," he said once. "You built yourself." And in return, she learned about the weight he carried, the expectations, the loneliness that came with being at the top, the pressure to always be perfect. "People see success," he told her one night as they stood by the window overlooking the city. "They don't see the cost. It was then she realized that beneath the polished surface, Jackson Archer was as human as anyone else, someone who had given everything to the world but had little left for himself. As weeks turned into months, their connection grew undeniable. Yet both of them were too cautious to act on it. They were aware of what was at stake, their reputations, their positions, the balance that could easily shatter if they crossed that invisible line. But life has a way of testing restraint. One night, after a long day of negotiations with investors, they found themselves alone again in the office. The storm outside mirrored the one inside both of them, unspoken emotions swirling just beneath the surface. Jackson leaned against the desk, loosening his tie, his eyes tired but soft when they met hers. "You should go home," he said gently. "It's late." "So should you," she replied with a small smile. He chuckled quietly. "I don't remember the last time I left before midnight." She hesitated for a moment before saying, "You should learn to." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted. The walls they had built around themselves began to crack. The space between them felt charged, fragile, and full of everything they hadn't said. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. "Olivia," he began, but the rest of his words faded. She understood what he was trying to say, that they couldn't do this, that it wasn't right, that the line between them was too fine. But she also understood what his silence meant, that sometimes, connections defy logic. She finally said, "I know." It was all that needed to be said. They stood there in quiet understanding, two people caught between reason and emotion, between the lives they had built and the one moment that threatened to rewrite it all. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Meetings resumed, reports were filed, and the world outside went on as usual. But something inside Olivia had changed. She realized that what she felt for Jackson wasn't infatuation, it was respect, admiration, and a strange, steady affection that came from truly knowing someone's heart. And Jackson, though he never said it out loud, showed it in small ways. In the way he trusted her with critical decisions, in the way he asked her opinion before finalizing plans, in the quiet smiles they shared across crowded rooms. Their story didn't need grand confessions or dramatic declarations. It was something quieter, deeper, built on trust, understanding, and a connection that didn't fade with time. Olivia knew that whatever the future held, meeting him had changed her life forever. Not because he was powerful, but because he had shown her that even in a world ruled by ambition and control, there was still room for vulnerability, kindness, and unexpected beginnings. And Jackson knew, perhaps for the first time in years, that success meant nothing without someone who truly understood him. In Olivia, he found that understanding, a mirror of strength and compassion that reflected everything he had been missing. Their paths had crossed by chance, but what grew between them was anything but accidental. It was real, quiet, and rare, the kind of story that didn't need an ending to feel complete.